It's time for the after show of the Improbability Engine. I'm Will Aubrey. Joe Darnell's here alongside me, and now we're going to talk about politics and really, to be honest, whatever else strikes us. It's a strange time, and a lot of people right now feel like strangers in a strange land.
Well, don't say that too loud. They'll deport you. It's a scary point. I'm a little frightened by what's going on around here. I mean, you've got a White House that's reversing, 70 years of foreign policy. You've got a State House that's doing everything it can to prove the old adage that government doesn't work. There's just a lot of stuff going on, Will, and frankly, it's making me pretty nervous.
I understand. A friend of mine who works for Volunteers in Service to America posted on Facebook earlier this week about a guy she knew who was from Iran, who was a professor here in the United States, and had also been involved in numerous projects to help students and help the poor. Mm-hmm. His wife is an American citizen. Mm-hmm. He's being deported.
It's just asinine.
And then you've got a situation where I've seen news reports, people from Iraq who've helped us with intelligence being deported. And let's just, for a moment, consider the fact that it's illegal.
Yeah.
The 1965...
Oh, by the way, and it's also illegal.
Yes, the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act prohibits using country of origin as a reason to not grant entry into the United States to someone. It's illegal.
What's really depressing to me, excuse me, I went to college, and aside from the learning you get that goes into college, I mean, there's a lot of it that goes in where you just read and you understand and you try to grasp concepts that are more difficult, but I met people that were different from me. I've got a buddy of mine who's from Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim country. And when I met him, I was like, are you Muslim? I was inviting him over to my house to eat. Are you Muslim? And I'm wondering, okay, well, we got to make sure that we keep things at least on the halal side of,
right.
I don't want to serve the guy ham fried rice or something like that if he can't have it. He goes, yeah, I'm Muslim. I don't really practice, but, I was like, so, dietary restrictions? He goes, I don't eat pork, but I do eat pork-like products. I was like, what do you mean pork-like products? It's like, we call them baby cow. I was like, what are you talking about? You mean like veal? He goes, no, it's pork, but, just so I can tell my parents that I don't eat pork, I call it baby cow. It's like, so you eat pork? He goes, yeah, I love pork steaks. And in fact, he would actually go to Food Giant on the south side of town and get pork steaks, 2 or 3 of them at a time. He loved them. He would just...
You put barbecue sauce on those, and they are awesome.
They are just fantastic. I mean, now, they're a little fatty, but honestly, the
fat's your friend.
Fat's your friend. That's it. Flavor is there. But then my freshman year, I took American National Government at Murray State, and my professor was Iraqi. Now, this was back before Saddam was overthrown. He had sought asylum in the United States, had been granted it, and was a professor at Murray State teaching government. I'm not going to say his name because that's not here nor there.
Right.
But this is a man who, once the United States overthrew Saddam Hussein and he was executed and they was no longer there, he was the one called upon by the U.S. government and by the Iraqi government to help them rebuild their government. This is a man who is a doctor, a PhD in government, and he was asked to do that. And now I wonder, if he tries to go back to Iraq to see family or to help, will he not be allowed back in? And it is an absolutely idiotic thing to do. And let's just brush over the fact that it's completely illegal. That's the thing that kills me about this whole thing.
Right. Now, moving right along, there is something that the president has done that is even more childish and idiotic. It's not as offensive, but it's more childish and idiotic.
That's a very high bar right now.
Well, this is almost mind-boggling. Okay? He's issued an executive order that if any of the regulatory agencies issue a new regulation, they have to eliminate 2 regulations already on the book for each new regulation that they impose. Now, okay.
Give me that job.
That's the most childish thing you could do in government. Now, I'm not saying there aren't regulations that need to be eliminated, okay? I'm sure there probably are. Eliminate the ones that need to be eliminated.
Right.
Don't just set an arbitrary quota that if you have a new regulation you have to eliminate 2. Pick out the ones that are stupid, the ones that impose an undue burden, and eliminate those, and make sure that any new regulation you issue isn't stupid, that it doesn't impose an undue burden. That's what you ought to do, not play some sort of stupid game.
That's only if you want results, Will. They don't care about results. They just care about keeping the people that voted for them thinking that they're doing something. I mean, let's be honest. Brookings Institution recently released a study that said that the areas that would be most negatively impacted by a trade war with either China or Mexico are the same areas that voted for Donald Trump.
This is something that I've got some cognitive dissonance about.
Okay.
I was a big supporter of Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that NAFTA has been detrimental to the middle class in the United States. And I thought that the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have a similar effect, perhaps on an even greater scale. However, there are some hard truths here. The first is that if you slap an import tariff on another country's goods, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not like you can walk, thinking that it does is like suggesting that you can walk up and slap somebody and they're not going to do anything, they're not going to slap you back. Okay?
Yeah.
You put an import tariff on Mexican goods, they are going to retaliate.
Yep.
And they are our largest trading partner.
Yeah.
Also, paying for it by doing that, let's think about who pays the import tariff.
Yeah.
Mexico doesn't pay the import tariff.
They absolutely don't.
Americans pay it as essentially an extra sales tax on goods.
Absolutely.
That's who pays the import tariff, not Mexico. And President Trump had claimed Mexico was going to pay for the wall. So it's idiot. It's
okay.
mind-boggling.
Let me talk you through your cognitive dissonance. Okay. I hold 2 things to be true. I say that free trade in particular, is beneficial to both sides who agree to the free trade. Okay, that's an economic theory that is the mathematics work. Okay, I also hold that the Trans-Pacific Partnership and NAFTA were not ideal, right? And needed to be reworked, needed to be looked at again. Now, on the very cursory glance, those things are in opposition to each other, but in reality, they're not. Because how you get to free trade is as important as the free trade itself. So if you don't have methods by which you can ensure environmental standards, labor standards, safety standards, product safety standards, then it doesn't matter what the free trade is. It's going to be a net negative.
And American farmers are up in arms because they believe they were going to be hurt badly by the United States not being part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was going to expand their markets, and they're really concerned about it. Plus, guess what happened after the executive order was issued by President Trump saying we didn't want to be part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
What's that?
China stepped up and said, hey, we'll take the United States' place. And New Zealand and Australia said, yay.
Here's what you got to understand. Trade is a foreign policy issue. It's not just an economics issue. It's a foreign policy issue. The reason why we fought so hard to get trade partnerships with countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand is not because they're going to buy a huge amount of American products, or that we needed to make sure that whatever we got from them was as cheap as we could get it. It was for no other reason than to supplant China as the economic power on the Pacific Rim. It was to isolate China. This is all part of the South Seas Islands problem. China's expansionist right now. They're trying to expand economically. They're trying to expand geographically. They're looking for new ties to different countries to expand their sphere of influence. That's why they're willing to deal with Philippines President Duterte. That's why that they're taking a hard line with Trump on damn near everything, especially the one China policy. They're going to do that because they want that expansion. If they can muscle in and become the number one power in the Pacific for trade, then there's not much else we can do. That in turn hurts the United States, because the products that those countries would buy in raw materials, be it steel or plastics or whatever, they would just get from China instead of from the United States. So that part of the TPP I understood. I also knew that, again, getting there is only half as important as how you got there. The narrative is important. You've got to put in aspects of environmental regulation, worker regulation, and product safety in every one of these free trade agreements, because otherwise it's not a free trade and it's not a fair trade. It's an asymmetric trade agreement that while there is no tariff, what you've got is basically we hold American companies to this standard, and the Vietnamese don't hold them to that standard, and so they can make things that is dangerous and cheaper and therefore flood the market. And now we're at a position where it's not fair trade, it's an unfair trade setup. So as long as you're agreeing with the same rules, free trade can work. If it doesn't happen like that, then it isn't fair to the United States, and it isn't fair to the trade partners that we've dealt with.
And you always have to keep in mind that it doesn't happen. Whatever you do, it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
It absolutely doesn't.
You can't just say, we're not going to do this because X, Y, Z. You have to also consider, if we don't do this, what's going to happen.
Right.
And in this case, what happens is China takes the place of the United States.
Right.
And that could have wide-reaching repercussions.
Absolutely. And there's an inherent problem there. One of the biggest ones that we've got is free trade makes you do strange things. For example, under certain free trade models, a country that produces a lot of petroleum might ship its petroleum and export it and import gasoline. If someone's able to refine gasoline cheaper than what you're able to do it, then it makes sense that you can send your excess petroleum and in return buy gasoline at a cheaper price. That helps everybody out. That's what happens with Mexico. Mexico is one of the largest refinery countries in the Northern Hemisphere. They're huge. They do a lot of it. We buy gasoline from Mexico, even though we export oil to them.
Another thing to consider as President Trump leads what I would call a retrenchment of the United States all over the world in foreign policy, both economically and otherwise. There is the danger that if we become isolationist in these respects, that the dollar will no longer be the reserve currency that the world uses. And
Absolutely.
if that happens, you could see complete economic collapse.
Well, and here's the issue. Ever since the end of World War II and the Bretton Woods Conference, the U.S. dollar has been the world's default currency. And as such, other aspects of American currency have become default. The U.S. T-bill, the Treasury bond, all those things. Countries who have a perceived instability problem will buy U.S. debt because that insulates them from harm financially.
Right. They know
China.
it's safe.
Right. China, developing countries love buying U.S. debt. Japan, after they went through their decade-long recession, the lost decade, they bought huge amounts of U.S. Treasury debt because it's stable. It's going to get paid. It's not a problem.
And people misunderstand the debt, okay? The key really isn't how much we spend versus how much we take in
Right.
in terms of tax revenue. Where the real key is how many treasury bills we sell as opposed to how many treasury bills we redeem.
Right.
That has to be pretty much balanced.
Right.
If that gets out of balance, that's where you've got real problems.
Absolutely. And what's more about that is that that's another form of foreign policy. To be able to go to an ally, let's look at Iraq or Afghanistan. We're trying to build those into stable countries where our military does not have to hold it up, right? You've got to make that safe for foreign investment. Now, that doesn't mean that you dump huge amounts of money into them, which is what we've done with no results. Instead, you utilize their ability to purchase your debt to create a financial situation where they say, yes, we do have this. This is what we've got in our coffers. We do have natural resources. Look no further than what's going on in Central Africa and the Chinese. The Chinese are more than willing to go in and go and mine or go in and buy mineral rights in Africa because they need the natural resources. But because both of them have an inherent stability built upon foreign powers, they have a trust that they can go through. And that's all that the economy is trust.
That's true.
That's the entire economy is trust. The dollar bill is a piece of paper unless you trust the backers of it. When it says, Federal Reserve note, that's saying, hey, look, full force and faith of the United States government is behind this. If you start taking that faith away, you're inherently going to have collapsing economic
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to be clear, when I was talking about the balance between treasury bills you sell and treasury bills you redeem, you have to be selling at least as much as you redeem.
Right.
Okay? And so that's why it's important that we want people to buy treasury bills.
Absolutely.
And that's why the notion that we should pay off the national debt and stop selling treasury bills is just crazy.
Only one president has ever paid off the national deficit, the debt. One president has done it. Andrew Jackson. What followed was the worst economic crisis in American history to that date. Debt tells people that it's okay. On a national side, it's okay. Some people are willing to buy my debt. I'm a good investment. I mean, think about it in everybody likes to talk about governments like they're people. Well, if you spend more money than you make, you declare bankruptcy. Yeah, but you're not a government. There's only one way that the government thing looks like your personal finances. And that's if you've got a good credit score.
Yeah.
If someone's willing to loan you money, you're a good investment. People will loan you money.
And if they aren't, then your life becomes far more expensive. Because let me tell you something. If you don't have access, if you're not fluid, okay, then you've got big problems.
Right.
I'm far from rich, but we're very fluid.
Right.
And that goes a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what we have now is we have a political a political party that has espoused the idea that no, we can handle all of our stuff that's important. They don't say what's important. They say we can pay all of the stuff. We can pay for all the stuff that's important, and we can cut taxes at the same time.
And every time they've done that in the past, the deficit has gone through the roof.
Right. And what's worse is it causes inherent instability in the markets.
It does.
Because people still demand roads with no potholes, bridges that don't collapse, a VA that actually works, a Social Security Administration that'll keep them from going into abject poverty, Medicaid for sick people. They want these things. People talk about it. They want these things. These programs work and they do good stuff, but they don't want to pay for it.
Two more things.
Yeah.
The Republicans have introduced a bill to cut Social Security by 1/3.
Which is ridiculous.
Now, they say it's only going to apply to people under the age of 50. That's a trick. Let's be clear that what they want is to get people over the age of 50 to vote for them because, this isn't going to affect me.
Right.
And that's really, really very troubling.
Let me ask you a question. Who under 50 collects Social Security?
The disabled.
The disabled. The physically incapable of doing
and
anything.
Children whose fathers have died.
Children who have had a parent die.
Right.
So you want to cut those people's money. You want to take, because I'm here to tell you, they're not living high off the hog on Social Security. It's not a number that you look at and say, they're doing really well. They're on Social Security. It doesn't work like that. And what's worse is Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, representative from Wisconsin, and former Republican vice presidential nominee, the only reason he got to go to college is because his father died and he got Social Security. And now he's talking about, let's cut Social Security for people under the age of 50. So it was good enough for him, but it's not good enough for anybody else.
Now, there is, however, one piece of news from the Trump administration that has been encouraging. Although I bet it will drive his supporters crazy. There was an announcement from the White House earlier today that they are going to keep intact President Obama's executive order regarding LGBTQ issues.
My answer to that is watch who he nominates for Supreme Court. Because he can say that, and if he nominates somebody who has a track record of voting against LGBTQ.
Yeah, I was proud of myself for not screwing that up.
There's a lot of subsections in that. If he nominates somebody to the Supreme Court that is vociferous in the opposition to the rights of those groups, then him saying no, we'll uphold these things. It's lip service. It's bait and switch. Get you looking over here so that I can do something really dastardly over here.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
He has no track record for me to trust at this point.
I understand. Now, you know that his supporters, if this gets any coverage in the press at all,
which it won't,
they're going to lose their minds.
Yeah, it's
now, and I know I'm leapfrogging here.
Yeah.
Too bad. The other thing that has gotten no coverage in the press was the shooting at a mosque in Canada.
Well, that's because non-Muslims can't be terrorists. You didn't know that?
It was a white supremacist shot and killed 6 Muslims at a mosque in Canada, and it's getting no coverage.
Well, I'll do you one step further. The talk that we have had about Muslims and terrorism has been centered around these countries that supposedly have been importing terrorists. The problem is they're not importing terrorists. These are not the countries that have had their nationals come to our shores and commit acts of terrorism.
Right, those countries aren't on the list.
Well, and the big talk is that those are also countries that Trump's company does a lot of business with. And the biggest name of the group
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. I mean, when you talk about the country whose nationals actually committed the worst terrorist attack in United States history, it was Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
It wasn't Sudan. It wasn't Libya. Libya did some bad stuff, granted. You know, you have the plane that went down over Lockerbie, Scotland, that was attributed to Libyan-supported terrorists.
Well, a friend of mine posted a meme on Facebook. It was a picture of the planes crashing into the World Trade Center towers, and it said, if anyone asks you why we're banning Muslims from entering the country, show them this. But as you say, those people weren't from any of these countries. They were
Right.
from Saudi Arabia, and we're still letting them in.
And quite frankly, if it were today, if we'd had this ban in 2000 and not today, 9/11 would have still happened.
Right.
It would have still happened. There would have been no big change. It's the same thing. It's the problem I have with this is it's not about terrorism. Because if it were, the countries whose nationals did come over and commit acts of terrorism in the United States, those countries would be on the list and not countries whose citizens don't. What this is about is nothing more, nothing less than racism. It's
That's
absolutely racism. And anybody who tries to tell you different is just wrong, flat wrong. Now, let's take it another thing that just really irritated me. National Holocaust Remembrance Day.
I couldn't believe this when I saw the news story. Go on.
The world takes one day a year to remember the victims of the Holocaust. And there were many groups who were victimized by the Nazis during the Holocaust. But no one group suffered more at the hands of the Nazis than the Jewish community. And it's not close. I mean, you can talk about, well, the Russians. Yes, there was a war, and it happened in Russia, and a lot of people died. We're talking about a systematic deportation and murder of a group of people.
6 million Jews.
6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust. And in his first Holocaust Remembrance Day, Donald Trump, who calls himself a friend of Israel, releases a statement on National Holocaust Remembrance Day that does not note the Jewish community.
It was mind-boggling. I couldn't believe it. I mean, you want to talk about racism?
This taken into account with what his number one assistant believes, the white nationalist in the White House, Brannon, what he has pushed for years at Breitbart. Now there is an absolute steady stream of connecting the dots that show that this is a racist.
And let's remember that the United States refused to admit Jewish refugees from Germany
Absolutely.
at that time.
Yep.
There's a movie, Voyage of the Damned.
Yeah.
And I may tear up here because it's mind-boggling to imagine this. But in this movie, there's this ship. It has these Jewish refugees.
Yeah.
They're coming to America, and they won't let them in.
Yeah.
I think I saw a story the other day. Anne Frank was denied a visa to immigrate to the United States. The Pope made the point here 3-4 years ago. He said the Allies could have stopped it. They didn't want to. He said they knew where the concentration camps were. They could have bombed the roads and railroads leading to the concentration camps. They didn't do it.
I think this is the most shameful part of what we're seeing right now.
And the reason we have the state of Israel today is the anti-Semitism back then, because due to the fact that Britain and the United States didn't want these Jews
Right.
They had to create a place to send them.
Yeah.
And so they took the land from the Palestinians,
Yeah.
created the state of Israel, and they sent them there.
Yeah. And there was actually a Twitter feed, and social media can do a lot of good things, and it can do a lot of bad things. One of the things that was one of the most powerful that I've ever seen on any social media platform, a Twitter account was set up, and when you talk about the voyage of the Dam, talk about that ship, the SS Chicago, something of that nature. It was a passenger liner,
Right.
full of the Jewish people desperately seeking to get out of Germany and get to the United States. And they were all turned away. And most of them died. They went through the manifest. And they went through and listed every name. And they posted pictures, if they had them, of these people who all they wanted was to not die. That's it. And we're talking fathers and mothers, infant children and young toddlers, grandparents, aunts and uncles. These are real people. And they were turned away within sight of the Statue of Liberty because there were people who thought, nah, this isn't our problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're doing it right now.
We are.
This is not the thing online that I've seen is everybody asking, well, I would have done this or this if I had been there then.
Do it now.
You're there now.
Yeah.
It is happening right now. So don't say I would have done something different if you're not willing to do it right now.
I saw this the other day, and sometimes you have to laugh to avoid crying. France called. They want their statue back.
I'm sure Trump will make a deal for that. I think that's all I've got for politics today. I hope everybody is I hope everybody's staying safe out there and doing what you can do to be a positive change in the world, and especially in this country right now. It's scary times, but have a little faith. Have a little faith that there are good people still out there, and as long as there are good people out there willing to do what needs to be done, then we're not defeated yet. So go out there, and if you don't find somebody doing that, be the somebody that does that. Be a positive influence. Go to your neighbors of different faiths and different skin tones and religions, and they might act different, they might talk different, they might not even speak English, but go and be welcoming. Go and be what you would want to be if that were you. That's the golden rule. I mean, treat others as you would like to be treated, and I think that's something that this country desperately needs right now.
Amen. And that brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.